Welcome on into the Cleveland Browns Report by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here talking about the latest buzz on Jameis Winston as ESPN's Jeremy Fowler released a little bit of what he's hearing. So I'm going to share that with you guys. Then I just want to talk a little bit about Ryan Day and the Buckeyes, which I know probably no one wants to hear any more of that negative news, but I thought you guys might appreciate or pursue an opinion of someone who's not an Ohio State alum, an Ohio State guy, but just an outsider's thoughts on the whole thing. But first, here's what Jeremy Fowler said on Jameis Winston and the Browns and the future for the two parties. Winston told reporters that he's open to staying with the Browns, who have improved on offense during his 4-game stretch as the starter. The Browns see Winston as a good locker room presence with the talent to run Kevin Stefanski's system. I'm not surprised that he is open to coming back. Why wouldn't he be open to coming back? He's playing some really good football for them. There's always the highs and lows of the Jameis Winston experience, but right now everyone's enjoying the highs. And that's the thing. We're at the peak of the mountain. But what happens when the lows come? And I'm not trying to be a rain cloud, but I'm just looking at the entire body of Jameis Winston's experience and resume. And it points to there are highs and there are lows. And so for me, I don't feel like we need to be in some major rush to decide whether or not Jameis should come back as the starter next year. We've got 5-6 remaining games to figure that out. Let's use those 5 or 6 games to figure that out. I am not ready to proclaim Jameis is going to come back and be the starter next year, and the Browns should give him a 2 or 3 year contract. Let's pump the brakes. If Jameis plays well for the next 5 or 6 games, then the decision is made for you. If he doesn't play well, then you have your decision. And it's not a good one because you're not really left with any clear direction or option at quarterback, especially with the way Andrew Berry talked about Deshaun Watson when Berry last spoke to the media. He didn't really give a whole lot of confidence in Watson returning as the starter. He just said our focus is on Watson rehabbing and getting healthy, which was a very different tone than he had a year ago when Watson had his season-ending shoulder injury and was playing super well after beating the Ravens. So very different tones between two similar circumstances of season-ending injuries about halfway through the year. But when it comes to Jameis, ask me, Petey, should the Browns bring him back as the starter? I don't know because I don't need to know right now. I need to know in March. So let's see how the rest of December and January plays out, and then we can make an informed decision. But I know the Jameis experience, and right now everything looks great. And I know you don't want to hear that rain cloud, but we do have to look at Jameis' entire track record. From Tampa to present, he has been up and down. And so when it's up, it's easy to say, let's bring him back as the starter. Let's see if we have that same opinion after the year is over. If we do, then we're all in agreement and there's really no debate to be had. But if he doesn't play super well over the next couple of weeks, then there's no reason you should feel obligated to lock yourself in because of what's been some good moments, but good enough to give out a sizable contract because if it's good enough for the Browns to want to bring him as the starter back, then it's going to be good enough for someone else, like maybe the Giants or someone who misses out on a top quarterback in the draft, to bring him over as their starter. And so now you got to think about the contract you have to Deshaun Watson, and then, of course, to Jameis Winston if you want to bring him back. That's a lot of investments to the quarterback room. You have to build up the rest of your roster as well. So do you want Jameis Winston to return as the starter? If the season ended after the Steelers game, hell yeah. But it didn't. So I'm going to say, ask me again in January. Ask me again in February, in March, right? We should not feel like we are pressured to make a decision on Jameis long-term before the season is over. So let me know down below in the comment section whether or not you want to see Jameis come back as the starter. I'm taking door number 3, which is ask me later. Now, before we get on to the rest of today's episode, talk a little bit more about this subject, then talk a little Ohio State, I do want to give a big shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. PrizePicks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All of that information is in the comments and description of today's video. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Just to wrap up the whole future at quarterback conversation debate here, if you want to move on from Deshaun Watson, I understand where you're coming from, but the money doesn't. Your dead cap hit would be $118 million. Your dead cap hit for 2026 would be $53 million and change if you move on from him as a post-June 1 designation this upcoming offseason. To me, this is just impossible. Maybe there is some crafty maneuvering you can do, but just surface level, you can't take on a $118 million dead cap hit for 2025. I mean, the salary cap's only be $280 million. Like, that's just way too big of a piece of the pie. Now, the next offseason, 2026, this is more manageable. It's not good still, but it's not impossible. You could still field a good roster. Like the Broncos, who Cleveland's about to play, they are playing a team that took on an $85 million dead cap hit by moving on from Russell Wilson, and they are above 500 right now. So you're not like going to be the worst team in the NFL because of the way you are handcuffed a little bit financially. So I don't see a world where Deshaun Watson is not on this roster in 2025 unless he himself says, I don't want to be on this team because I'm not the starter anymore, and he kind of pulls a whole, charade that he did in Houston a few years ago all over again in Cleveland. But I don't see the Browns just outright releasing him unless there are some drastic changes made to this contract. So that's kind of the end of the Jameis Watson latest and what the Browns are going to do at quarterback in the future. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about Ryan Day and Ohio State. So just full transparency, I'm not an Ohio State alum. I went to Tennessee, so maybe you don't care about my opinion, and I don't blame you for that. Or maybe you're kind of looking for an outsider's thoughts on this whole scenario after losing to the team up north for a fourth straight time. Whenever you talk about wanting to fire a coach, to me, I ask myself two questions. One, what are your expectations, right? If you are Texas Tech, if you are Illinois, if you are Ole Miss, I don't think the expectations are every single year we better be a championship contender or else heads will roll. Whereas that's the case at Ohio State. That's the case at Alabama. So expectation-wise, you are falling short. Yes, Ryan Day is doing a phenomenal job of making sure the program does not fall into the college football abyss like my Tennessee Volunteers did for far too long, like Nebraska right now, like Miami, like Michigan did under Rich Rod. So Ryan Day is making sure you don't ever get to that area of, hey, fire me. And here's part two of my twofold question. Who are you going to get that's better? You might not find anyone better, and you might be losing more than just the Michigan game. So when it comes to should the Buckeyes fire Ryan Day, if he doesn't win a playoff game, I think he has to go. That, to me, is the only way he can buy himself another year. I understand emotionally there is nothing that Ohio State fans care more about than beating Michigan, but time heals all wounds, and if he wins a couple of playoff games, I think come mid to early January, people are going to be a little bit more forgiving about Day. So credit to him for making sure the bottom never falls out. I mean, just a couple of stats, like he is 66-10 as a head coach. He's never had a 3-loss season. I mean, look at the last couple of years, 11-2, 11-2, 11-2, 10-2. So he is consistently making sure Ohio State is top 10, which for an administration, that's not a bad thing. If the administration's expectation is we are top 10 and if we win a natty, that's gravy, then he has a job for life. And that might piss off the fan base, and rightfully so, but it might not anger the administration because they may not want to be the next Miami, the next Tennessee, the next Nebraska, the next Michigan, where you fall out of relevancy for years because you fired him because you were emotional after another loss to Michigan and you didn't have a better coach lined up. So if you're firing Ryan Day, it better be because the guy you have circled is too good of a candidate to pass up on. And is a slam dunk home run. We're going to finally beat Michigan, and we're going to guarantee we're still a 10-win team every single year. Because take it from someone who has been in the depths of college football hell. My 4 years at Tennessee, 2016 to 2020, stunk. One good season in 2016, bad after that. You have no idea what it's like to have consecutive miserable Saturdays. He has spared you from that. But I'm not an Ohio State guy, so I can't relate to how it feels to lose to your biggest bitter rival. I mean, sure, I know all about that with Alabama and Florida for so many years in a row, but I'll give the nod to Ohio State, Michigan being a little bit above that and what it means to those two fan bases and the expectations for Ohio State. So if it were up to me, I'd let Ryan Day's future be decided by the college football playoff. If he can win, not just one, but I'd say 2 playoff games, then I think he can come back for another year. If it's, hey, he won the first round and then got blown out in the second round, I think your decision's made up because you're not competing for natties. You are just not not just treading above water because you're a top 10 perennial team, but you're not close to the mountaintop and you're losing to Michigan. That's where I stand on the whole thing. Let the next 1 to 2, 3, 4 college football playoff games dictate his fate. So there's my thoughts on it. Sorry about the loss yesterday. I know that sucked for everyone watching. And if you're a Michigan fan watching and a Browns fan, yesterday was your Super Bowl. All right, before we get on out of here, some love to the Brown and Orange Club. We will be live on the channel for Monday Night Football, Browns at Broncos. So come hang out with us for having a fun watch party. And appreciate everyone for tuning in as always. Hope you guys had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we'll see you guys later with more Browns news and rumors. But quick reminder to go ahead and click that subscribe button down below.